Bones allow us to safely and securely support our weight as we go about our daily lives. Muscles provide us with the strength we need to continue our survival and achieve our goals. But the often unsung hero of today's videos is equally as important as the previous two are at ensuring anatomical stability and competent movement. Akin to the tires of a bicycle or the shock absorbers of a car, cartilage provides us with the assurance that the physical rigor of our day-to-day activities never become harsh enough to impair us. That is, of course, until the cartilage is almost entirely worn away due to constant use by the time old age is reached, and then that guarantee is no longer in effect. The frailty of the elderly is a cogent reminder as to how vital cartilage is to healthy movement. Although this tends to not be as much of an issue for modern populations due to the widespread epidemic of increasingly sedentary lifestyles. As a result, the cartilage is simply not worn away enough due to a lack of physical activity, yielding an unexpected positive effect of the modern sedentary lifestyle. Although it should be noted that this one paltry benefit pales in comparison to the laundry list of accompanying ailments. More archaic populations, such as early agriculturalists or hunter-gatherers, often experience a much more pronounced decay of cartilage at younger ages than do contemporary populations. Although this perceived benefit is overturned by the fact that individuals often expired at earlier ages in the not-so-distant past. So, the undesirable side effects of cartilaginous weathering did not necessarily have to be endured by those who weren't around to suffer them. I don't know about you, but I'd much rather deal with the modern issues of being slightly stiff and achy in old age rather than having to deal with being 6 feet under at 35 years old. All this to say that cartilage is a very important substance employed by the body to perform a very important role. Now, it's all well and good acknowledging how useful cartilage is, but what exactly is it? Cartilage is a type of tissue found in the body that often, but not always, can be found at the point where two extremities meet and conjoin with each other. It can also be found in the rib cage, surrounding the neck, amongst various soft tissues, and numerous other places. This type of substance is known as connective tissue, and there are numerous different types of connective tissue which serve various functions and occur at various locations around the body. Connective tissue in general tends to consist of comparatively more malleable and less rigid substrate than the substance it surrounds or encapsulates. It should come as no surprise to you that the cartilage associated with bones also tends to be less sturdy than said bones. Where cartilage does occur, it is often described as being translucent and non-permeable to water. This quality is important as cartilage can often be found in the tubes of many orifices around the body, such as the trachea. This allows it to effectively prop itself open whilst also being invulnerable to moisture buildup. Cartilage is also, thankfully, unfeeling. It does not generally contain many nerves or even really any kind of substantial blood supply. Due to this, you cannot receive much sensation due to any kind of cartilage stimulation. This one is more of a blessing than a curse, as being subjected to feeling the grinding and tearing motions the cartilage is often exposed to would be less than pleasant indeed. Considering the fact that blood is the primary method via which nutrients and oxygen are delivered to organic tissue, the question of how cartilage is maintained as a living tissue is naturally posed. Well, it is actually achieved through the process of intracellular diffusion. In lieu of a direct biological infrastructure through which the cartilage can be fed nutrients and oxygen, such as in the case of musculature for example, the cartilage must instead be supplied through the indirect and often passive method of gradual diffusion. The nutrients slowly shifting from an area of plentiful concentration to the relatively nutrient-deprived area of the cartilage itself. This lack of a coursing blood supply may be partially responsible for the reality of cartilage being quite susceptible to long-term damage, as hasty and substantial repairs are often out of the question. The feeble blood supply would also be too insignificant to allow for the embedding of nervous tissues into the cartilage. The structural complexity and resource demands placed by nerves onto its surroundings would likely be too heavy a toll for a tissue which is parched of blood to satiate, such as in the case of cartilage. As I mentioned earlier though, the lack of nerves in these structures may be a blessing in disguise. Also, partially as a consequence of blood supply, cartilage also has quite a slow rate of cellular division, which helps explain its mediocre ability to repair and maintain itself. Enough about the foibles of cartilage. What is it actually any good for? In addition to its ability to allow for the greater articulation of limbs and so forth, cartilage also serves as a sort of intermediary transition between bones and less hardy tissue such as muscle or sinew. This allows the often high-impact shearing forces exerted by the rapid movement of bones to be absorbed by the comparatively stiffer, harder medium of cartilage as opposed to tender muscular tissue. Were the impacts of bone to be solely suffered by muscle, it would lead to very high concentrations of mechanical stress to occur in these areas, often leading to tissue damage or outright mechanical failure over a prolonged period of time. In addition to the association between cartilage and interstitial fluid, the existence of the glycoprotein lubricin also increases the effective lubrication of cartilaginous contact points. These surfaces being well lubricated vastly increases their effectiveness in promoting joint articulation and the movement of limbs, as well as aiding in decreasing the total amount of wear and tear suffered by cartilage over a lifetime of strenuous, high-impact movement. Another advantage of cartilage is also just how tough and resistant a biomaterial it actually is. Yes, cartilage is not as strong as bone in terms of pure material strength, but its relative tenacity is quite impressive and more than enough to weather the often outright barbaric stresses placed upon it by a dynamic skeleton. The hardiness of cartilage is quite commendable when you realize just how thin those discs that line your spinal column actually are. And yet somehow they seem to last most individuals almost their entire lives while simultaneously sacrificing their own cohesive structures so that other tissues can be spared. Finally, cartilage is also simply an effective aid in maintaining rigidity and structure in parts of the body where the synthesis of bone would prove impractical or awkward. In areas such as the aforementioned trachea, or when cartilage is directly integrated into areas such as the rib cage, it functions as an invaluable aid when it comes to supporting a bipedal organism. Like most topics I seem to cover on this channel, the question of how this trait evolved cannot be answered in a concrete, straightforward way. The paleontological record is simply much too obscure and much too incomplete for that. The one thing that most researchers seem to agree upon is that cartilage likely predated bone. No surprise there. It functioned as a sort of retroactive placeholder for what would become the gold standard of load-bearing implements in most dynamic moving organisms. The specialized tissue that is bone actually followed the emergence of cartilage, with its manifestation in many modern tetrapods having been relegated to small yet useful nubs present on the ends of their younger, more capable relatives. However, to earlier, often seaborne life, cartilage was sturdy enough to do the job. It provided much needed structure and support to invertebrate organisms similar to the role bone plays in larger, land-dwelling vertebrates. The story may be a more complicated, fragmented one than it would first seem, however, as there is evidence to believe that the development of cartilage occurred numerous separate times, and in distinct lineages, mirroring a form of convergent evolution. Even still, in these distinct lineages, each with their individual cartilaginous backstory, the actual composition of these various forms of cartilage are remarkably similar to one another, indicating a sort of chemical Goldilocks mixture from which strong yet malleable cartilage can be produced. This only further serves to underline the true utility that cartilage provides a moving organism. As I mentioned earlier, there is no certain clear-cut story as to how cartilage evolved and what its true purpose may have been to earlier organisms. But the development as portrayed to us in the fossil record seems to be one of ever-increasing rigidness and strength of this structural medium, with the earliest proto-cartilage toting specimens exhibiting the growth of immature, rather weak cartilage filling the role of structural support. These eventually progress into sturdier, more mature forms of cartilage in preceding organisms, whilst the vertebrates seem to have achieved the, as of yet, final form of this trait, bones. So it would appear that the motivation for evolving cartilage is actually almost as straightforward as you could surmise for any given trait. It's purely utilitarian and seemed to evolve solely as a structural support, as I've said countless times in this video already. This conclusion should of course be tempered with a healthy quenching of skepticism though, as should almost any hypothesis of evolutionary origin. But truth be told, the magic of cartilage probably lies in its history as an honest, simple solution to the crushing, compressing question of gravity and water pressure.